Welcome to this week's episode of Seeing Double. I'm Lisa Dickinson, garden girl at 2 Peas in a Bucket, and today I'm working with washi tape and Project Life style cards to make both a layout and a card. I'll be showing you some different ways to use these supplies, and hopefully you'll be inspired to include them in your next project. Even though I don't do Project Life, I like to collect these sheets of cards because I think they're very versatile for scrapping. On the layout I'm going to create, I'm basing the whole design around these cards. I've grabbed several sheets from my stash. I've got some from My Mind's Eye, Simple Stories, Studio Calico, these two are Webster's pages, Jenni Bowlin, and Echo Park. I'm not going to use them all, but laying them out helps me see what I have and figure out which ones will work together. After looking through them, I've cut out a few that I like together. I've got a pink one with a sentiment that I'm thinking of using as a title, a green frame that would work well for journaling or as a photo frame, and then two others that I plan to use as backgrounds, much like pattern paper. Because these cards are sized 3 by 4 to fit in the Project Life pockets, I know that I can fit 4 of them perfectly across a 12 by 12 layout. So I'll start my design by simply lining those up. The theme of my page is kind of centered around this pink card which says keep calm and smile on. It's the end of the school year for my kids, and we've had a lot of projects and reports and tests going on, so their homework load has been pretty heavy, which of course means I've had some really grumpy kids. So on this layout, I'd like to remind them that even when life gets stressful, it's important to keep smiling and keep a positive outlook. I'm going to treat each card as a separate color area on my layout. I've pulled out some of my washi tapes that reflect these 4 colors, and I'm planning on incorporating them into each area. So I'll have the blue elements on the blue card, the pink on the pink, and so on. I'd like to include my photos and embellishments within this horizontal band. So I'm going to figure out what size I should print my photos now. I've got a few random phone photos of my kids smiling and happy, and I'm going to use 2 or 3 of them on this page. Since I don't want to cover up too much of the cards, I think a 2 by 2 inch photo size would work well. So I've printed my photos and I have a rough idea of where they'll go in the design. In addition to my washi tapes, I've grabbed a handful of bare chipboard embellishments that I just want to scatter across the design. So I'm going to lay some of them out just to see where they might work as little accents. And once I've determined where they'll be positioned on the page, I'm going to use these washi tapes to cover them and create some custom accents. Now that my chipboard's arranged, I'll work on covering each piece with washi so it coordinates with the color of the card behind it. I really love using washi tape with bare chipboard because you can make the chipboard match your page perfectly, and it's not as messy as mist or paint would be. You just stick enough washi on the front of the shape to cover it, and then you can use your small scissors to trim away the excess tape. To finish off the edges of the tape, I like to use just a little bit of sandpaper, and it kind of helps file off the little bits of excess or overhang, and it seals the edges so they're real smooth and even and makes it look more like a packaged chipboard. I've covered each chipboard piece using that same technique, and those are all ready to go. Now I'd like to add in some more washi tape, I guess in a more traditional application, just by sticking down some small strips of the various colors and patterns to tie my cards together and add a little bit more color and pattern to the page. Please excuse my head in these next shots. My regular tripod is getting fixed and I'm kind of using a makeshift one for this filming. I didn't realize how close it was to my head until after I'd already finished filming this segment and everything was all stuck down, but I promise I will move my head out of the way here at the end so you can see where I'm placing the tape. Alright, now you see where I applied a few smaller strips of washi, both horizontally and vertically across my design. To fill in a few of the bare spots, I've gathered some small embellishments that work with my color palette. I've got some epoxy stickers, a few different brands of enamel dots, these small bows from Webster's pages, and a couple pieces of metal flare. I'm going to try to work some of these in on the different color sections of my layouts. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good. I just want to add a few little enamel dots because I seem to be adding these to all of my layouts lately. And I like to kind of pull them off the backing with my craft knife because it makes it easy to apply them and then they just slide off the knife and you can stick them right on the page. So I'm going to add a few clusters of these and then I'll move on to my title and journaling. I haven't stuck down any of my chipboard yet, just in case I need to adjust it slightly for my title, which I'm planning on placing under the pink and green cards. I also want to incorporate some journaling, so I'm going to work on those two things next. With all of the colors on my layout, I decided my title needed to be soft and subtle, so I opted to use vellum. I die cut the word smile twice, and I used the font Cookie with my silhouette, and I'm going to layer the two of these together so they'll have just a bit more opacity than a single sheet of vellum would. I'm planning on stitching the title with my sewing machine, but to keep it in place while I sew, I'm just going to use a tiny bit of vellum adhesive on each layer, and I'll position it, and that'll help keep it stable while I run it through my sewing machine. Now I've added the 2 rows of stitching to secure my title, and while I had the sewing machine out, I added a few other rows of stitching in a couple places on the layout, so my title wouldn't be the only place that stitching appears. I've also typed up my journaling, and I printed it out on a sheet of white cardstock. I'm going to cut the lines of journaling apart so I have lots of little strips, and then I can arrange them to fit in the space that I want them on the page. I use journaling strips quite often because I tend to leave my journaling for last, and I need the text to be flexible to fit in whatever space I have left. So this way you can cut the strips shorter or longer and kind of arrange them, squeeze them into the space that you have and make it work. Okay, I've cut up the journaling strips and laid them out on my page in a vertical column to balance out the strong horizontal lines of the rest of the design. At this point, I'm just going to adhere everything down, and then I will give you a look at the completed page. For the second seam double project, I'm making a card using the same washi tape and Project Life cards. To begin, I've cut a standard 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 card from white cardstock for my base. I'm going to create a kind of woven background using strips of washi. I'll start with one strip vertically in the center. And then I'll just cross it with another strip adhered horizontally. I'm going to keep applying strips horizontally and vertically until I've built up a colorful background. The nice thing about washi is that it tends to be a little bit translucent, so the area where it crosses another tape shows through, and it kind of looks like it's woven together, even though it's not. And it's a lot easier to create this woven look than it would be if you were actually weaving the pieces together. With my background all taped, I'm ready to embellish the card. I've covered some Maya Road chipboard using the same technique I showed you earlier, so I have a yellow star and a pink heart all ready to go. Then for the card sentiment, I'm pulling out these Project Life cards again. The sheet from Simple Stories works really well with my washi colors, so I just cut one of the phrases for the card sentiment. This is just another use for these type of cards if you're not using them for Project Life. I'll just play around with the arrangement until I get all these elements exactly how I want them. And then I think I need a few little embellishments just as a finishing touch. So I'm going to add some of the small buttons, maybe some epoxy stickers. I've got some from My Mind's Eye in Basic Gray. But I think these little buttons from the Dear Lizzie Lucky Charm line will go really well. I've got a blue one, a yellow one, and then a little green one that I'm just going to arrange in a little triangle here. So I think I'm ready to adhere everything down, and then I will give you a look at the finished card. Thanks so much for joining me for this episode of Seeing Double. I hope you've been inspired to try out some of these techniques with your washi and journal cards. For more information on this video, please visit 2peasinabucket.com and click on the video tab.